Let me tell you something about getting old that nobody warns you about. It's not the burning shoulders after 40 years hammering shingles under a Florida sun. It's not the creaking knees or the doctor visits that feel like final notices. No. The real thing nobody warns you about is your own son. My name is Victor Morales. Folks around the Keys just call me Vic. I'm 69 years old, and for the last 43 years I've built Morales Roofing and Restoration from absolutely nothing. It started with one beat-up Ford pickup, a box of nails, and a prayer that the next hurricane wouldn't take the roof off my own house before I could pay the next month's rent. Today we run 15 trucks, 32 crews, and we're the first name people call when the wind starts howling across the Florida Straits. I still remember the smell of hot tar on a July afternoon, the way it sticks to your skin and your clothes and your soul. I remember the first time I stood on a roof in Islamorada and looked out at the ocean like it belonged to me. That feeling never left me. Even now, when the sun beats down so hard the shingles feel like they might melt, I still climb the ladder every single day. Some habits you just can't shake. 3 months ago, everything changed in the blink of an eye. I was up on a commercial building in Marathon, replacing a section of flat roof after a tropical storm. The heat was brutal, the kind that makes the air shimmer. I reached for another bundle of shingles, and the next thing I knew, the world tilted sideways. My left arm went numb. My chest felt like someone had parked a truck on it, and I woke up on the ground with my foreman yelling my name. The doctors called it a mild stroke. Mild. Funny word for something that makes you realize how fast the clock is ticking. They kept me overnight, ran tests, and sent me home with a list of pills and a stern warning to slow down. Slow down. I'd been hearing that word for years, but this time, it landed different. That same night, my son Diego showed up at the hospital with his wife Rachel. Diego is 51 now, broad shoulders like mine, same dark hair, but the eyes have changed. He used to look at me like I hung the moon. Lately, he looks at me like I'm standing in the way of it. Rachel was right beside him, holding a bouquet of flowers from the hospital gift shop and wearing that soft, concerned smile she practices in the mirror. "Dad," Diego said, squeezing my hand a little too hard. "You can't keep doing this alone. Rachel and I have been talking. We want to move in, help around the house, make sure you're okay. We'll take care of you." I looked at him for a long moment. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. My mouth still tasted like hospital jello. I thought about the empty rooms in my 2-story house on the canal, the way the silence had started to feel heavier since my wife Maria passed 8 years ago. I thought about how nice it would be to hear footsteps in the house again, to have someone to share a cold beer with on the back porch after a long day. "You sure?" I asked. "Dad, you're all we've got," he answered. His voice sounded warm, but something in it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hook, line, and sinker." I said yes. 2 days later, they moved in. Diego carried boxes up the stairs like he already owned the place. Rachel unpacked dishes in the kitchen and rearranged my cabinets without asking. Their 13-year-old son Lucas bounced around the house like a puppy who'd just been let off the leash. That boy. God, that boy. He has his grandmother's gentle eyes and my stubborn chin. The first evening he was there, he followed me out to the garage and watched me sharpen my old roofing knife. "Grandpa, can I help you on the roof sometime?" he asked. I smiled for the first time since the hospital. "Only if you promise not to fall off, kid." The first couple of weeks felt almost normal. Diego helped with some light yard work. Rachel cooked dinner on Sundays. Nothing fancy but edible. Lucas would sit with me on the back porch every evening, legs dangling over the edge, asking questions about how I started the company, how I met Grandma, what it was like roofing in the 80s before everything got so computerized. I told him stories until the mosquitoes chased us inside. I told him about the time a Category 4 storm tried to rip the roof off a church in Key Largo and how my crew and I stayed up there until the job was done. I told him about the first truck I ever bought on credit and how I paid it off by working 7 days a week for 2 straight years. Lucas listened like every word was gold. One night after dinner, when the sky had turned that deep Florida orange, I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of papers. Diego and Rachel were on the couch, pretending to watch television. I slid the simple agreement across the table. The one that said they could stay as long as they wanted. No rent. Just family helping family. Diego read it quickly, then looked up with that same practiced smile. "You sure about this, Dad?" "I'm sure," I said. "Sign it. Let's make it official." He signed. Rachel signed. I signed. Diego leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. "We've got your back, Dad." "Always." He said it with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. I should have noticed it then. Maybe part of me did, but I was tired. And the house felt warm again. And for the first time in years, I wasn't climbing into an empty bed wondering if this was how the rest of my life was going to sound. I told myself everything was going to be fine. I was wrong. I was wrong. The first few weeks after they moved in felt almost like a second chance at the family life I thought I had lost when Maria passed. Morning started with the smell of coffee brewing downstairs, and the sound of Lucas's sneakers slapping against the tile as he ran to the fridge for orange juice. Diego would grunt a good morning while scrolling through his phone, and Rachel would hum some pop song under her breath while flipping eggs in the pan. It was noisy. It was alive. For the first time in 8 years, the house didn't feel like a museum of memories. I tried to keep my routine the same. Up at 5:30, black coffee, check the schedule for the day's jobs, then head out to whichever roof needed me most. Diego offered to drive me a couple times, but I waved him off. "Still got 2 good legs and 1 decent truck," I told him. He laughed like it was a joke, but I caught the quick glance he shot Rachel across the table. Rachel was the first crack I noticed. She never said anything outright cruel. That wasn't her style. Instead, she'd smile that sweet, practiced smile and slip the knife in so gently, you almost thanked her for it. One Saturday, I was out on the back porch cleaning my old roofing knife. The one with the worn wooden handle I'd had since 1987. Rachel stepped outside with a glass of iced tea and set it beside me. "Vic, you really should let Diego handle the heavy tools from now on," she said, voice soft as cotton. "At your age, a cut like that could turn into something serious." At your age. The words landed like a loose shingle. I looked up at her, squinting against the Florida sun. She was still smiling, eyes wide and innocent. I forced a chuckle. "Been sharpening this knife longer than you've been alive, Rachel. I think I can manage." She patted my shoulder like I was a child who'd just said something cute. "Of course you can. Just looking out for you." Then she went back inside, humming again. I sat there staring at the knife until the tea got warm. Diego was smoother about it. He'd wait until we were alone in the garage or out by the trucks. He'd talk about modernizing the company, bringing in drones for inspections, software for scheduling, maybe even selling off the older trucks to a bigger outfit that could take the business to the next level. I'd listen, nod, and tell him the same thing every time. "We've been doing it this way for 43 years. The roofs don't leak." He'd smile the same smile his mother used to give me when she knew I was being stubborn. But his eyes stayed cold. Lucas, though. Lucas was the one thing that still felt real. The boy had taken to following me around like a shadow. Every evening after dinner, he'd grab the extension ladder from the garage without being asked and set it against the back of the house. "Roof time, Grandpa?" he'd call out. I never said no. That first real climb happened on a Thursday when the sky was painted every shade of orange and pink. I went up first, testing each rung out of habit, even though I knew the ladder was solid. Lucas came up right behind me, moving careful but excited, his sneakers squeaking on the rungs. We sat side by side on the peak of the roof, legs dangling over the gutter, looking out at the canal where the water glowed gold in the sunset. The breeze carried the smell of salt and mangrove. Down below, I could hear Rachel's voice floating up from the kitchen window, talking to Diego about something I couldn't quite make out. Lucas swung his legs slowly. "Grandpa, how come you never get scared up here?" I laughed under my breath. "Oh, I get scared. Every single time. But fear's just the price you pay for the view. He thought about that for a long minute. Then he pointed at the horizon where the last sliver of sun was slipping into the water. I want to be just like you when I grow up, he said quietly. I want to build things that last. I want to sit on roofs and watch the sun go down and know I made something people can count on. My throat got tight. I put my arm around his narrow shoulders and pulled him close for a second. He smelled like sunscreen and boy sweat, and the laundry detergent Rachel used. For that one moment, everything felt right. The house, the company, the future, it all felt possible again. We sat there until the sky turned deep purple and the first stars poked through. When we finally climbed down, Diego was standing at the bottom of the ladder with his arms crossed. He didn't say anything, just watched us with that same unreadable look I'd seen in the hospital. Rachel was on the porch holding 2 glasses of lemonade like she'd been waiting for us. "You boys be careful up there," she called out sweetly. "At your age, Vic, one slip and that's it." There it was again. At your age. I took the lemonade and thanked her anyway. But as I drank it, I felt the first real chill of the evening settle between my shoulder blades. That night I lay in bed listening to the house settle around me. Diego and Rachel's low voices drifted down the hallway from the guest room they'd claimed as theirs. Lucas's door was cracked open, and I could hear him breathing steady and slow. Already asleep. I thought about the way Diego had looked at us on the roof. I thought about Rachel's smile and her careful little comments. I thought about how quickly "we've got your back" had started to feel like a weight instead of a promise. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself the family was finally whole again. I was wrong about that too. That chill between my shoulder blades didn't leave me. It stayed there like a loose nail you know is going to work itself free eventually. But every evening, Lucas made it easier to ignore. Right after dinner, before the mosquitoes got too bold, he'd drag the big extension ladder out of the garage without being asked. I'd hear the aluminum clatter against the siding and smile before I even reached the back door. "Roof time? Grandpa?" he'd yell. Already halfway up, I'd follow, testing each rung out of pure habit. Even though I could climb it blindfolded, we claimed the same spot every night, the peak right above the canal. The shingles were still warm from the day's sun, radiating heat through our jeans. Lucas would sit cross-legged, elbows on his knees, staring out at the water like it held every secret in the world. I sat beside him, close enough that our shoulders sometimes touched when the breeze shifted. Those evenings became my favorite part of the day. One Tuesday, he asked me how I started the company. The sky was bleeding orange into purple, the kind of sunset that makes you forget how hot the day had been. I told him the truth. No sugarcoating. I got out of the army in '81 with $200 in my pocket and a duffel bag full of clothes that smelled like diesel and regret. I said, "Maria was pregnant with your dad. We needed a roof over our heads, literally. I bought that first Ford for $800 on credit from a guy who felt sorry for me. Painted Morales roofing on the side with a brush and house paint. First job was patching a shed for my neighbor. He paid me $75 and a 6-pack of beer." Lucas laughed. That bright, unguarded sound that made the whole roof feel lighter. "And then what?" I shrugged. Then I kept climbing. Hurricane after hurricane, roof after roof. Some days I ate peanut butter sandwiches in the truck. Some nights I slept in the cab because I couldn't afford a motel. But every single time I nailed down the last shingle, I knew that house was going to stay dry. That mattered. He listened like the story was oxygen. I told him about the time we worked through a tropical storm in Key West. Wind, trying to peel us off the roof like stickers. I told him about the first big contract, 20 houses in a new subdivision, and how I had to borrow money from Maria's cousin just to buy the materials. I told him about the day we finally paid off the last truck, and I took the whole crew to eat steak at the only place in town that didn't ask for a credit card. Lucas never interrupted. He just nodded, eyes wide, soaking it all in. After a while, he started helping me in the garage, too. I'd spread an old tarp on the concrete floor and lay out my hand tools. The ones that weren't for the crews, but the ones I still used myself. Lucas would sit there with a rag and a small can of oil, polishing the blades and handles until they shone. His small hands moved careful and steady, the same way mine had when I was his age. "You know what these are?" I asked him one night, holding up the old roofing knife. He grinned. "The ones that make the roofs stay on." "Damn right," I said. "And they only work if you respect them. Same as people." He looked up at me then, eyes serious in the garage light. "Grandpa, when I grow up, can I work with you? Like, for real? Not just on the roof at night." My chest did something funny. Not the stroke kind of funny, this was warmer, deeper. I ruffled his hair and told him, "Kid, when you're ready, the company's got a spot with your name on it." I meant it. Down below, through the open garage door, I could see Diego standing on the back patio. He wasn't moving, just standing there with his arms crossed, watching us through the doorway. The light from the garage hit his face at an angle that made his expression hard to read. But I didn't like the shape of it. It wasn't anger. It wasn't jealousy exactly. It was something colder, like he was calculating the weight of every word I'd just said to his son. Rachel's voice floated out from the kitchen window, calling them in for dessert. Diego didn't answer right away. He kept staring up at the garage for another long second, then turned and walked inside without a word. Lucas didn't notice. He was too busy wiping down the last tool, humming some song he'd heard on the radio. But I noticed. I noticed the way the night suddenly felt a little heavier, even with the warm Florida breeze and a 13-year-old boy who thought I hung the moon. I told myself it was nothing. Just a father watching his own son bond with his grandpa. But the chill between my shoulder blades came back stronger than before. That night I couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan spun lazy circles above my bed, pushing humid air around the room. But my mind wouldn't settle. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Diego standing at the bottom of the ladder, arms crossed, watching Lucas and me on the roof like we were part of some problem he needed to solve. I finally gave up around 1 in the morning, swung my legs over the side of the bed, and padded downstairs in my bare feet. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant lap of canal water against the dock. I figured I'd grab a glass of water, maybe look over tomorrow's job schedule on my desk, then try to sleep again. The door to my small home office at the end of the hallway was cracked open just an inch. A thin blade of yellow light spilled across the tile floor. I hadn't left any lights on. I pushed the door open slowly. Diego was sitting at my desk. My desk. The one I'd built myself from cypress wood back in '92. He had my old leather ledger open in front of him, and his phone propped up, camera flash off, snapping quiet pictures of the pages. The screen glowed against his face, turning his features sharp and unfamiliar. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he looked up, smooth as oil, and smiled that same hospital smile. "Hey, Dad. Couldn't sleep either?" I stayed in the doorway, one hand still on the knob. "What are you doing in here, Diego?" He closed the ledger casually, like it was nothing. "Just looking for a pen. Mine ran out upstairs, and I didn't want to wake Rachel. Figured you wouldn't mind." A pen. At 1 in the morning. With my entire client ledger open and his phone camera pointed at it, I stepped inside and shut the door behind me with a soft click. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. "You could have asked me in the morning." He leaned back in my chair, lacing his fingers behind his head like he owned the place. "You're right. Sorry. Old habits. I was thinking about the company, actually. That's why I came down here. We've been talking, Rachel and me, about how we could help you more. Really take some weight off your shoulders." I crossed my arms and waited. Diego kept going, voice low and reasonable. The way people talk when they've rehearsed the words in the shower. "Morales Roofing is solid, Dad. Nobody's saying it isn't. But the industry's changing. Drones for roof inspections, GPS fleet tracking, software that bids jobs automatically. The big corporations are eating up the small outfits that don't adapt. We could sell to one of them, get top dollar, and you'd finally retire. Travel. Sit on a beach somewhere without worrying about the next hurricane. I let the silence stretch. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it had any right to. Sell, I said finally. He nodded like it was the most natural idea in the world. Rachel's cousin works at a private equity firm in Miami. They're looking for established regional players exactly like us. 15 trucks, loyal crews, strong reputation in the Keys. They'd keep the name for a while. Pay us a premium. You'd walk away with enough to live like a king. No more climbing ladders. No more stroke scares. He said the last part gently, like he was doing me a favor by reminding me I almost died. I walked over to the desk, picked up the ledger, and closed it with a deliberate thud. I didn't build this company to hand it over to strangers who've never nailed a single shingle in their lives. Diego's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. Nobody's saying strangers. We'd still be involved. I could run operations. Rachel's great with the books. You'd be chairman emeritus, whatever title you want. Just not climbing roofs at 69 years old. There it was again, the age thing. Slipping in so easy, like it was concern instead of a crowbar. I set the ledger back down exactly where it had been. I've heard this pitch before, son. Different suits, same words. My answer's still no. He stood up slowly, pushing the chair back. For a moment, the two of us just looked at each other across the desk I'd built with my own hands. Then he gave a small shrug, the kind that said he was being patient with an old man. Think about it, Dad. That's all I'm asking. We're family. We only want what's best for you. He walked past me, close enough that I caught the faint smell of the expensive cologne Rachel had bought him for Christmas. At the door, he paused. By the way, that pen? I found it. He held up a cheap ballpoint like a trophy and slipped it into his pocket. Then he was gone. Footsteps soft on the hallway tile. I stood there a long time after the door clicked shut. My heart was beating too hard for 1 a.m. I sat down in the chair he'd just left warm and opened the ledger again. Nothing looked out of place, but something felt wrong. I picked up my own phone, the one I kept on the desk for business. I opened the photo gallery out of pure habit. Sometimes I snap pictures of damaged roofs for insurance claims. That's when I saw it. A new folder I hadn't created. Inside were 8 crisp photos. My client list. My current contracts. My profit margins scribbled in the margins. All taken from angles that hid the flash. All time-stamped 11:57 p.m., just minutes before I walked in. My stomach dropped like I'd stepped off a roof with no harness. I sat there in the dark office, the only light coming from my phone screen, staring at proof that my own son had been copying the guts of everything I'd spent 43 years building. The chill between my shoulder blades turned ice cold. The chill between my shoulder blades turned ice cold. I didn't sleep much after that night. Every time the house creaked, I pictured Diego downstairs again, phone in hand, copying the only thing I had left that still felt like mine. I kept the ledger locked in the bottom drawer and started carrying the key in my pocket like some paranoid old man in a movie. But I didn't confront him. Not yet. I told myself I needed more proof. Needed to be sure before I blew up the fragile peace we'd built in the house. 3 days later, on a Tuesday that felt too ordinary for what was coming, Diego caught me in the kitchen after dinner. Lucas had already gone upstairs to do homework. Rachel was loading the dishwasher, humming again. Diego leaned against the counter, arms loose, looking relaxed in a way that made my stomach tighten. "Dad, you got a minute?" he asked. "There's some old tools down in the basement I want you to look at. Might be worth selling on eBay or something. Could bring in a few extra bucks." Tools. The basement. I almost laughed at how casual he made it sound. But something in his tone, the way he kept his eyes on the coffee mug in his hand, instead of on me, set off every alarm I'd been ignoring. Still, I nodded. "Sure, let's go look." Rachel glanced over her shoulder, that sweet smile flickering for half a second. "You boys be careful down there. It's dark." We went down the narrow wooden stairs together. The basement air hit me first, damp, earthy, smelling of concrete and old cardboard boxes stacked against the walls. I'd used the space for years to store spare shingles, coils of flashing, and the old paper files I refused to throw away. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, throwing hard shadows across the floor. Diego walked ahead of me, boots loud on the steps. I was down here yesterday looking for that old circular saw you used to have. Found a bunch of stuff that's just collecting dust. Figured we could clear some space, make the basement useful again. I reached the bottom step and stopped. The concrete felt cold through my socks. Useful for what? He turned to face me. The bulb swung slightly behind him, making his face move in and out of shadow. For the future, Dad. Look, I've been thinking more about what I said the other night. That private equity offer? It's real. They're willing to pay cash enough to set you up for life. Rachel and I could run the day-to-day while you finally relax. No more strokes. No more climbing in 100-degree heat. I felt the words rising before I could stop them. I already told you my answer. Diego's jaw tightened. You're being stubborn. This isn't 1980 anymore. The company needs fresh blood, new ideas. You keep saying no because you're scared of letting go. But what happens when the next stroke isn't mild? What happens to Mom's memory if the house gets sold to pay medical bills? He knew exactly where to push. Maria's name in his mouth felt like a cheap shot. I took one step closer. The damp air thick between us. This company kept food on the table when you were a kid. It paid for your college even when you dropped out after 2 semesters. It put a roof over your head, literally. And now you want to sell it to some suit in Miami who's never swung a hammer in his life? Diego's voice rose. I want what's best for the family. Lucas deserves more than watching his grandpa kill himself on roofs. Rachel and I have plans. Real plans. You're standing in the way of them. The basement seemed to shrink. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Your plans don't include me keeping what I built. That's what this is really about. He laughed, short and sharp. You built it? We've been carrying you for months. Moving in here. Cooking. Cleaning. Listening to the same old war stories every night. And for what? So you can sit on your high horse and say no to $1 million offer? I felt the heat rush into my face. Get out of my basement, Diego. He didn't move. Instead, he took a step toward me, close enough that I could smell the same cologne again. Sign the papers, Dad. Do it tonight, or I swear I'll make sure every crew knows the old man's losing it. That he had a stroke and can't be trusted anymore. The threat landed like a fist. I opened my mouth to answer, but before the words came out, his hands shot forward flat against my chest, hard and sudden. The world tilted. My heel caught the bottom step. I felt myself going backward, arms windmilling, the bare bulb spinning overhead in a sick yellow blur. The back of my head cracked against the concrete. Pain exploded behind my eyes. Then my shoulder, my hip, my elbow, each stare a separate hammer blow as I tumbled down the last few steps and slammed onto the cold floor. Everything went quiet except for the ringing in my ears. I lay there on my back, chest heaving, tasting blood where I'd bitten my tongue. The basement light swung above me like a pendulum. Through the haze, I saw Diego still standing at the top of the stairs, silhouetted against the rectangle of kitchen light. Rachel's voice drifted down from somewhere behind him, soft and amused. Let him stay down there. The words floated down like ash. Then the light went out. The door at the top of the stairs clicked shut. Darkness swallowed everything. Darkness swallowed everything. The door at the top of the stairs clicked shut with a soft, final sound that echoed down the concrete walls like a coffin lid. For a long second, there was only black and the ringing in my ears. Then the pain hit all at once, sharp, electric, everywhere. My left shoulder felt like it had been ripped out of its socket. Something hot and wet was running down the side of my face and into my ear. My ribs screamed every time I tried to breathe. I lay on the cold floor, concrete pressing against my back like a slab of ice. and I couldn't move my legs the way I wanted. I heard their voices above me, muffled through the door but clear enough. Rachel laughed. First soft, almost playful, like she'd just told a joke at a dinner party. "Let him stay down there," she said. The words drifted down the stairwell and landed on my chest heavier than any hammer I'd ever swung. Diego's voice came next, lower, satisfied. "He'll get the message this time." Footsteps moved away. A cabinet door opened and closed. The refrigerator hummed. Normal house sounds. The kind of sounds you hear when everything is fine and nobody is bleeding on the basement floor. I stared up into the nothing. My eyes were open, but the dark was so complete, I couldn't tell if I was still conscious or already slipping away. The only light left in the world was a faint gray rectangle at the very top of the stairs, where the door didn't quite meet the frame. It looked a mile away. 12 seconds. That's what I figured I had left before the darkness won. My right hand still worked. Barely. I could feel my fingers twitching against the concrete, sticky with blood. The phone was in my shirt pocket, the same cheap Android I'd carried for years because I hated learning new gadgets. I'd kept it there every single day since the first mild stroke scare, right where the doctor told me to keep it just in case. Just in case. I moved my arm. Pain exploded through my shoulder like someone had driven a nail through it. But I kept going. My fingers brushed the edge of the pocket. Slipped. Tried again. The fabric was damp and warm. Blood. My blood. I pinched the corner of the phone between two fingers and dragged it out, millimeter by millimeter. It felt like lifting a cinder block. The screen lit up when I pressed the power button too bright in all that black. The sudden glow made my head spin worse. I blinked hard, forcing my eyes to focus. Contacts. I needed contacts. My thumb slid across the glass, leaving a red smear. There it was. Tommy Reyes. My lawyer. My friend. Since basic training in '79. The only man I trusted. With my life and my legacy. I tapped his name. The phone started ringing. 1 ring. 2 rings. "Come on, Tommy. Pick up." My vision was tunneling now, the edges going soft and gray like old film burning. My ribs felt like they were grinding against each other with every shallow breath. I could taste copper in my mouth, but I held the phone to my ear with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. "Vic?" Tommy's voice came through, sharp and alert even though it was late. "You okay, man?" "It's after 10. My voice came out thin and ragged. Nothing like the man who used to bark orders across a job site. "Tommy, listen." "No time." He went quiet instantly. I could picture him sitting up straight, already reaching for a pen. That's the kind of friend Tommy is. "I'm listening," he said. I swallowed blood and kept talking. Every word cost me. The documents, the trust we talked about. For Lucas. Do it tonight. Everything, the company, the house, the accounts, transfer it all to the Lucas Morales Trust. Effective immediately. Diego and Rachel are out. Completely out. Another wave of pain rolled through me. The gray at the edges of my vision was closing in fast. I forced the next words out before they could disappear. "Record this call, Tommy. I, Victor Morales, instruct you to execute the transfer of all primary assets to the Lucas Morales Trust. Remove Diego Morales and Rachel Morales as beneficiaries. Do whatever you have to do tonight. The rest. When I wake up, I heard the faint click of him hitting record. God bless that man." "Understood," Tommy said, voice steady as steel. "Vic, who did this to you?" The question hung there, but the darkness had already decided it was finished waiting. My fingers went slack. The phone slipped, clattered onto the concrete beside my head. I heard Tommy's voice still calling my name, small and far away, before the gray swallowed the last sliver of light. Then there was nothing, just cold concrete. The slow drip of blood somewhere near my ear, and the echo of Rachel's laugh still ringing in the dark. Let him stay down there. I was down there. But I wasn't staying. When I opened my eyes, The world was white and beeping. The smell of antiseptic hit me first, sharp and cold, followed by the steady mechanical rhythm of a heart monitor somewhere above my head. My left shoulder was wrapped in a thick white cast that felt like concrete. 3 cracked ribs made every breath feel like I was swallowing broken glass. 8 stitches pulled tight above my left ear, and the concussion turned the hospital lights into soft, swimming halos. But I was alive. That was the only thing that mattered. The first face I saw clearly wasn't a nurse or a doctor. It was Gloria Hensley, my neighbor from 3 houses down. 61 years old, retired schoolteacher, the kind of woman who noticed everything and forgot nothing. She was sitting in the plastic chair beside the bed, crossword puzzle book in her lap, reading glasses perched on the tip of her nose. When my eyes focused on her, she let out a long, shaky breath and pressed a hand to her chest. "You gave me quite a scare, Vic Morales," she said, voice soft but steady, the way she used to talk to her 3rd graders when they were hurt on the playground. "I thought I'd lost you." I tried to speak. My throat felt like sandpaper. "Gloria, how?" She set the crossword book aside and leaned forward, taking my good hand in both of hers. Her palms were warm, papery, and surprisingly strong. I was on my back porch grading papers, old habit. Even though I retired 5 years ago. It was quiet. Too quiet. Then I heard it. A loud thud, like something heavy falling downstairs, followed by nothing. No groan, no call for help, just silence. Something in my gut told me it was you. I grabbed my phone and the spare key you gave me last year after Maria passed, and I ran. She paused, eyes glistening, but refusing to cry in front of me. "Your front door was unlocked." I walked in and heard faint voices upstairs, Diego and Rachel talking in the kitchen like nothing had happened. I called your name. No answer. Then I saw the basement door. It was closed, but the light was off. I opened it, and there you were, lying at the bottom in the dark, bleeding, phone still lit up beside your head. I closed my eyes for a second, remembering the cold concrete, the last words I'd forced out to Tommy. Gloria kept going, voice dropping lower. "I called 911 right there. While I waited for the paramedics, I noticed something else. Those little security cameras you installed last month, the ones you told me were just for peace of mind. They're everywhere, Vic. Hallway, garage, even the top of the basement stairs. I checked the live feed on your phone while the ambulance was coming. They caught everything. Diego's hands on your chest. The push. Rachel's laugh. The door closing. All of it. My heart monitor beeped a little faster. A strange warmth spread through my chest despite the pain. Those cameras, my secret insurance policy, had just become my lifeline. Gloria squeezed my hand. "Tommy Reyes got here 20 minutes after the ambulance. He's been in the hallway making calls ever since. That man doesn't sleep. He told me the trust is already in motion. Lucas owns everything now. Everything." I tried to smile. It hurt, but it was real. "Good. That's good." We sat in silence for a minute. The only sound, the soft beeping and the distant chatter of nurses in the hallway. Gloria wiped her eyes quickly with the back of her hand, then straightened up in that prim schoolteacher way of hers. "You're not alone, Vic. Not anymore. I've already told the nurses no visitors except me and Tommy until you're ready. But I think your son and his wife are about to test that rule." Right on cue, the door opened. Diego walked in first, face arranged into perfect concern, eyebrows furrowed, mouth turned down. The exact expression you practice in the mirror when you know the cameras might be watching. Rachel was half a step behind him, holding a cheap bouquet of carnations from the hospital gift shop and wearing softer colors than usual, like she'd Googled how to look like a worried daughter-in-law. "Dad," Diego said, voice thick with fake emotion as he rushed to the bedside. He reached for my good hand, the one Gloria wasn't holding. "We had no idea. We thought you'd gone out for a walk or something." We were looking everywhere. We feel terrible. Absolutely terrible. Rachel nodded quickly, eyes wide and shining. Just sick about it, Vic. We came as soon as we heard. I looked at them both. Really looked. The same faces I'd seen every evening on my porch. The same voices that had filled my house with noise and life for the last few months. Now they looked like strangers wearing familiar masks. Gloria stood up slowly, smoothing her sweater. "I'll give you all some privacy," she said, but her eyes told me she wasn't going far. She stepped into the hallway, leaving the door open just enough. Diego waited until she was gone, then leaned in closer. "Dad, what happened? Did you slip? The basement stairs are dangerous at your age." I cut him off with a look. My voice was raspy but steady. "I didn't slip." Rachel's smile faltered for half a second. Diego's hand tightened on mine, just a fraction too hard. Before either of them could say another word, a new figure appeared in the doorway. Tall, calm, leather briefcase in hand. Tommy Reyes. He didn't knock. He just walked in like he belonged there, nodded once at me, then turned to Diego and Rachel with the same polite, unreadable expression he used in court. "Diego. Rachel. Good of you to come so quickly." Diego's face did something complicated. Confusion. Recognition. Then a flash of pure panic that he tried to bury under another concerned smile. "Mr. Reyes, why are you here?" Tommy didn't answer right away. He simply pulled the visitor chair closer to the bed, sat down, and opened his briefcase, like we were about to discuss the weather. I looked at my son and daughter-in-law, lying there in a hospital bed with broken bones and blood still crusted in my hair, and I felt something shift inside me. The game had already changed. They just didn't know it yet. I looked at my son and daughter-in-law, lying there in a hospital bed with broken bones and blood still crusted in my hair, and I felt something shift inside me. The game had already changed. They just didn't know it yet. Diego kept holding my good hand like it was a lifeline, his thumb rubbing slow circles across my knuckles the way a caring son is supposed to. Rachel hovered on the other side of the bed, arranging the cheap carnations in a plastic pitcher she'd grabbed from the windowsill. She fluffed the pillow behind my head even though it didn't need fluffing. "Dad, we were so worried," Diego said, voice thick and trembling just enough to sound believable. "When the ambulance pulled up, we thought, God, we thought the worst. We searched the whole house, the backyard, the dock, everywhere. We had no idea you'd gone down to the basement." Rachel nodded quickly, eyes glistening with practiced tears. "I feel sick about it, Vic. Truly sick. If we'd known you were down there alone." She let the sentence trail off like the thought was too painful to finish. I didn't speak right away. I let them perform. I wanted to see how far they would go. Diego leaned in closer, lowering his voice to that intimate father-son tone he used when he wanted something. "Look, this whole thing is a wake-up call. For all of us. You can't keep pushing yourself like this. The company, the roofs, the ladders. It's too much at your age. We've been talking about it for weeks. Quietly. Because we love you." Rachel jumped in smoothly, right on cue. "We could take over the day-to-day. You'd still be the owner, of course. Chairman for life. But we'd handle the stress, the paperwork, the crews. You could finally rest. Sit on the porch with Lucas, watch the sunsets without worrying about the next storm." She smiled that sweet, tooth-filled smile I used to think was genuine. Now it looked like plastic wrap stretched over something colder. Diego squeezed my hand again. "We already talked to that private equity group in Miami. They're ready to move fast. Top dollar, Dad. Enough for you to live like a king. No more hospital beds. No more scares like this one." I let the silence stretch. The heart monitor beeped steadily between us. Outside the open door, I could see Gloria standing in the hallway, arms crossed, watching everything like a hawk. Tommy sat quietly in the corner chair, legs crossed, briefcase on his lap, saying nothing. His presence filled the room more than any words could. Diego finally noticed him. His eyes flicked over, lingered, then came back to me. A tiny muscle jumped in his jaw. "Mr. Reyes," he said, trying to keep his voice warm, "we appreciate you coming by, but this is a family moment. Dad needs rest, not more business talk right now." Tommy didn't move. He simply offered a small, polite nod. "Of course. I'm only here as a friend." Rachel shifted uncomfortably, her fingers tightening on the edge of the bedrail. She tried to smile at Tommy, but it came out crooked. "We were just telling Vic how much we want to help. How much we want to protect the company he built." I finally spoke. My voice was rough from the tube they'd had down my throat in the ER, but it carried. "You want to protect it?" I asked. Diego nodded eagerly. "Exactly. Protect it from any more mistakes, from anyone taking advantage of your condition." I looked straight at him. "The only mistake I made was believing family meant something." The words landed heavy. Rachel's smile froze. Diego's hand went still on mine. For the first time since they walked in, the performance cracked. Diego's eyes darted to Tommy again, then back to me. His voice dropped, almost pleading now. "Dad, come on. We're your blood. We moved in to take care of you. We've been there every day." I kept my face neutral. "You were there tonight too, weren't you?" Rachel's face went pale under the hospital lights. She glanced at the door like she was measuring how fast she could reach it. Diego laughed nervously. "What are you talking about? We were upstairs the whole time. We didn't even know." Tommy cleared his throat softly from the corner. The sound was small, but it cut through the room like a knife. He didn't say a word. He just sat there, calm and steady, watching them the way a judge watches lawyers who are about to lose. Diego's eyes locked on Tommy now. Real fear flickered across his face for the first time. "Dad!" His voice cracked. "Why is your lawyer here?" The question hung in the air between us, raw and desperate. I didn't answer right away. I let it sit there, let the weight of it press down on both of them. The heart monitor kept its steady rhythm. Outside, Gloria took one step closer to the doorway, her arms still crossed. Rachel's hand trembled as she set the plastic pitcher down. Diego's face had gone from concerned son to cornered animal in the space of 3 heartbeats. I looked at my son, at the man I had raised, fed, clothed, and loved for 51 years, and I felt something break and heal at the same time. The performance was over. The real show was just beginning. The performance was over. The real show was just beginning. I spent 11 long days in that hospital bed. 11 days of bad jello. Aggressive physical therapy that made my cracked ribs feel like they were being sawed apart. And nurses who called me Mr. Morales in that careful voice people use when they think you might break. The doctors said the concussion was significant. The shoulder would need months of rehab, and the ribs would hurt every time I breathed deep for the next 6 weeks. But I was alive. I was going home, and Tommy had made sure the house was ready. They discharged me on a Thursday afternoon. Gloria drove me in her old beige sedan, windows down, Florida breeze carrying the smell of salt and mangrove. She didn't say much on the ride. She just kept glancing over at me like she was making sure I was still solid. When we pulled into the driveway of my 2-story house on the canal, the place looked exactly the same. Pale blue siding, white trim, the big royal poinciana tree blooming red in the front yard. But everything felt different. Diego and Rachel were waiting on the porch like a perfect welcome committee. Diego had even mowed the lawn. Rachel held a pitcher of fresh lemonade with slices of lemon floating on top. They smiled the same smiles they'd worn in the hospital. Concerned, loving, rehearsed. Lucas stood a little behind them, shifting from foot to foot, eyes lighting up when he saw me. "Grandpa." He ran down the steps and wrapped his arms around me carefully, avoiding the sling on my left arm. I hugged him back with my good arm and breathed in the smell of boy sweat and sunscreen. That hug was the only real thing in the whole welcome scene. "Welcome home, Dad," Diego said, stepping forward to take my overnight bag. "We kept everything. Just how you like it. Dinner's almost ready." Rachel nodded, eyes wide and shining. "We're so glad you're back. The house felt empty without you. I let them help me inside. I let them fuss. I let them pour me a glass of lemonade and settle me into my favorite armchair in the living room like I was made of glass. I watched them perform the role of devoted son and daughter-in-law, while the sun dipped lower outside the big windows overlooking the canal. All 11 days in the hospital, Tommy had been working quietly. He came every single afternoon, briefcase in hand, updating me in low voices while Gloria stood guard at the door. The trust documents had been signed the same night I lay bleeding on the basement floor. The security camera footage had been copied, time-stamped, and locked away. The Lucas Morales Trust was now the legal owner of Morales Roofing and Restoration. The house, the trucks, the bank accounts, everything. Diego and Rachel had been removed as beneficiaries with surgical precision. But I hadn't told them yet. I wanted them to feel safe for one more night. I wanted them to wake up Friday morning still believing they were about to inherit the kingdom. Friday came bright and hot. I was sitting in the same armchair, coffee in my good hand, when the doorbell rang at exactly 9:55. Tommy was never late and never early. He was precisely on time. I called out, voice steady. "Diego, Rachel, could you both come in here? Tommy's here. We need to go over a few things." I heard Rachel say something low and sharp in the kitchen. Diego answered in that same calm-down tone he used when he thought I couldn't hear. Then they walked into the living room together, Diego in front, Rachel half a step behind in her usual position. They saw Tommy standing by the coffee table, leather briefcase already open, a thick stack of documents neatly arranged. His expression was calm, almost gentle. Diego's eyes locked on the papers. His face did that thing again, confusion sliding into recognition, then something close to panic. "Dad," he said, forcing a smile, "what's going on? Why is Mr. Reyes here again?" Rachel's hand found the back of the couch for support. Her smile was still there, but it looked brittle now, like cheap paint cracking in the sun. I took a slow sip of coffee. "Sit down," I said quietly. "Both of you, please." They sat. The couch creaked under their weight. Lucas had gone out back with Gloria to look at the boats on the canal. I'd asked her to keep him occupied. This wasn't for his ears. Not yet. Tommy didn't waste time. He didn't need to. He simply picked up the top document, turned it so Diego and Rachel could see the official seal, and began speaking in that clear, courtroom voice I'd heard him use for 30 years. "As Mr. Morales' attorney of record for the past 22 years, I am here to inform you both that effective the night of the incident in the basement, all primary assets of Victor Morales have been transferred into the Lucas Morales Trust." The room went very still. Tommy continued, voice even. "The company Morales Roofing and Restoration, including all 15 trucks, equipment, contracts, and goodwill, now belongs entirely to the trust. The house on the canal, the bank accounts, the retirement funds, everything has been placed under independent trusteeship with myself as executor until Lucas reaches 25. Diego Morales and Rachel Morales have been removed as beneficiaries in accordance with Mr. Morales' explicit recorded instruction." Diego stared at the papers like they were written in a language he no longer understood. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Rachel's face had gone completely blank. The sweet smile was gone. There was nothing left but raw calculation. Tommy set the document down gently. The transfer was executed the same night Victor made the call from the basement floor. We have the recorded phone call, time-stamped at 10:47 p.m., and security footage from the cameras Mr. Cess Morales had installed. Everything is legal. Everything is final. I watched my son's face crumble in real time. The man who had pushed me down those stairs was gone. In his place sat someone who finally understood that the roof over his head was no longer his to take. Diego looked at me, eyes wide and desperate. "Dad, this can't be right. You were hurt. You were on medication. You weren't thinking clearly." I met his gaze without blinking. "The only thing I wasn't thinking clearly about," I said, "was you." Rachel stood up so fast the couch shifted. She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned, and walked out of the living room without a word. The front door slammed a moment later. Diego stayed seated, hands on his knees, staring at the documents like they might disappear if he looked away. The papers were already signed. The roof over our heads had a new owner. The front door slammed so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. Rachel was gone, but the echo of her footsteps still hung in the air like a threat. Diego remained on the couch, hands gripping his knees, eyes fixed on the stack of documents Tommy had placed on the coffee table. The room felt smaller. The Florida sunlight streaming through the windows suddenly too bright, too harsh. Tommy didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. He simply picked up the next page, adjusted his reading glasses, and continued in that calm, measured tone that had won more cases than I could count. "As you can see from Exhibit A," he said, sliding the paper toward Diego, "the Morales Roofing and Restoration Corporation was transferred in its entirety at 11:03 p.m. On the night of the incident. All 15 trucks, all equipment, all current contracts, all goodwill and intellectual property associated with the brand now held in irrevocable trust for Lucas Morales. The trust is administered by an independent trustee until Lucas reaches the age of 25. You, Diego, and your wife Rachel have been formally removed as contingent beneficiaries." Diego's mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. He looked like a man who had just been told the sky was falling and was trying to decide whether to run or stand still. Tommy kept going, unflinching. "Exhibit B covers the real property, the house, the land, the dock, and the canal frontage rights. Lifetime residency rights remain with Victor Morales. Upon his passing, the property passes directly to the Lucas Morales Trust. No liens, no mortgages, no claims by any other party are permitted." Rachel's voice suddenly cut in from the hallway. She had come back inside without us hearing the door. Her face was flushed, mascara starting to run. "This is insane." He was on the floor bleeding. He was confused. "You can't just..." Tommy turned his head slightly. Polite, but firm. "Mrs. Morales." The phone call was recorded in its entirety. Victor's instructions were lucid, detailed, and given of his own free will. We also have time-stamped video from 4 separate security cameras showing exactly what occurred in the basement. The court will have no difficulty validating the transfer. Diego finally found his voice. It came out hoarse. "Dad, you can't do this. This is our home. This is my father's company. I'm your son." I leaned forward in the armchair, the sling on my left arm heavy against my chest. The pain in my ribs flared, but I ignored it. "You stopped being my son the moment your hands left my chest and I started falling." The words landed like a hammer on a nail. Diego flinched. Rachel stood frozen in the doorway, one hand still on the frame. Tommy slid another document across the table. "Exhibit C details the financial accounts. All business and personal checking, savings, and investment portfolios have been restructured into the trust. Liquid assets total approximately $2.8 million as of last week's valuation. None of it is accessible to either of you." Rachel laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that didn't match the sweet voice she usually used. $2.8 million? You're telling me we get nothing? After everything we did for him? After we moved in here and after you pushed him down the stairs and left him to die in the dark? Tommy finished quietly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The words themselves were sharp enough. Silence crashed over the room again. Diego's shoulders slumped. He looked smaller somehow, like the weight of 43 years of my work had suddenly landed on his back instead of mine. His eyes moved from the papers to me, then to Tommy, Then back to the papers. What about Lucas? He asked. The question came out raw, stripped of all the performance. For the first time in months, it sounded like something real. What happens to my son in all of this? I met his eyes and held them. Lucas is taken care of better than you could ever manage. The trust ensures his education, his future, and a stake in the company when he's ready. He'll learn the business the way I did, from the ground up, not from the top down. He'll never have to wonder if his own father would push him down a flight of stairs for money. Rachel made a small choking sound. She turned away, pressing her forehead against the doorframe. Diego put his face in his hands. His shoulders started to shake, but no tears came. Just the silent, shuddering collapse of a man who had finally run out of angles to play. Tommy closed the briefcase with a soft click. You have 2 weeks to vacate the premises. All personal belongings will be supervised during removal. Any attempt to interfere with the trust or the company will result in immediate legal action. The security footage has already been copied to multiple secure locations. I watched my son sitting there on the couch where he used to watch football games with me on Sunday afternoons. The same couch where Lucas had fallen asleep against my shoulder more times than I could count. The man in front of me looked like a stranger wearing my son's face. Rachel whispered something I couldn't hear, then walked out again. This time, the door closed quietly, like she no longer had the energy to slam it. Diego stayed a few moments longer. He lifted his head, eyes red but dry. I never meant for it to go this far, he said. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. He stood up slowly, like an old man himself, and walked out of the living room. His footsteps faded down the hallway. Tommy looked at me. You did what you had to do, Vic. I stared at the empty doorway where my son had just disappeared. The canal outside sparkled under the midday sun. Somewhere in the backyard, I could hear Lucas laughing with Gloria. The papers were already signed. The roof over our heads now belonged to the right person. Diego lifted his head slowly, eyes red-rimmed but still dry, like the tears were trapped somewhere behind a wall he couldn't quite break. The afternoon light slanted through the big living room windows, painting long golden stripes across the hardwood floor and the stack of legal documents that now sat between us like a verdict. Outside, the canal sparkled under the Florida sun, small waves lapping against the dock with the same steady rhythm they'd kept for 43 years. But inside the house, everything had gone still. What about Lucas? He asked again, voice cracking on his son's name. It wasn't the smooth, rehearsed tone he had used for months. This was raw, stripped bare, the sound of a man who had finally run out of scripts. I let the question hang there, heavy as wet shingles on a roof. My ribs ached with every breath, but the pain felt distant now, pushed aside by something colder and clearer. I looked at the man sitting on my couch, the same couch where he used to fall asleep watching Sunday football when he was Lucas's age, and I saw both the boy I had raised and the stranger who had pushed me down the basement stairs. Lucas is taken care of, I said quietly. My voice still carried the rasp from the hospital tube, but it didn't waver. Better than you or Rachel could ever manage. The trust doesn't just protect the money, Diego, it protects him. Diego's hands tightened on his knees until the knuckles went white. Rachel had drifted back into the doorway, one shoulder pressed against the frame like she needed the wood to hold her up. Her mascara had started to run in thin black lines down her cheeks, but she didn't bother wiping it away. I continued, keeping my tone even. Every single asset, Morales Roofing and Restoration, all 15 trucks, every contract we've ever signed, every piece of equipment, the goodwill of the name itself now belongs to the Lucas Morales Trust. The house, the land, the dock, the savings accounts, the retirement funds, everything has been moved into irrevocable trust. You and Rachel have been removed as beneficiaries. Completely. No loopholes. No second chances. Rachel let out a sharp, broken sound, half laugh, half sob. This is crazy, Vic. You were bleeding on the floor. You were confused. You can't just rewrite 40 years of family because of one bad night. One bad night? I repeated. The words tasted bitter. You stood at the top of those stairs and laughed while I lay there in the dark. You said, "Let him stay down there." I heard you. The cameras heard you too. Diego's head snapped up. Cameras? I nodded once. The ones I installed last month. Quiet little things. One in the hallway, one in the garage, one right at the top of the basement stairs. They caught everything. Your hands flat against my chest. The shove. The way my body hit. Every step on the way down. Rachel's laugh. The door closing. All of it. Time-stamped and crystal clear. Tommy already sent copies to the court and to 3 different secure servers. You can't erase them. You can't talk your way out of them. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. Diego stared at me like I had just pulled the floor out from under him a second time. I leaned forward slightly, ignoring the fire in my ribs. You asked about Lucas? So let me finish answering. That boy is going to grow up knowing his grandfather fought for him when no one else would. He'll get the education I never had. He'll learn the business from the ground up the way I did, climbing ladders, swinging hammers, smelling hot tar on a July afternoon. He'll never have to wonder if the people who are supposed to love him would leave him bleeding in the dark for a bigger paycheck. Diego's shoulders started to shake. Real tears came now, sliding down his cheeks unchecked. He didn't wipe them away. He just sat there. A 51-year-old man reduced to the scared kid I once carried on my shoulders after a Little League game. I thought if we got the company, we could give him everything. He whispered. A better life. No more watching his grandpa kill himself on roofs. No more worrying about the next storm. I shook my head slowly. You thought wrong. The only thing Lucas ever needed was a father who wouldn't trade his own blood for money. He needed a father who wouldn't push his grandfather down the stairs and walk away laughing. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the canal outside seemed quieter. Rachel turned away, pressing her forehead against the doorframe so hard I thought the wood might crack. Diego covered his face with both hands, elbows on his knees. And for the first time since he was a boy, I saw his shoulders shake, with real, gut-deep sobs. I watched him for a long moment. Part of me, the father part that had once taught him how to swing a hammer and drive a nail straight, wanted to reach out. The rest of me, the man who had lain on cold concrete listening to his own son walk away, stayed still. Tommy spoke from the corner, voice low but firm. You have 2 weeks to vacate the premises. All personal belongings will be removed under supervision. Any attempt to interfere with the trust or the company will be met with the full weight of the evidence we now have. Diego didn't answer. He just sat there, broken in the afternoon light, while the canal kept sparkling outside like nothing had changed. Somewhere in the backyard, Lucas laughed again, bright, innocent, full of the kind of hope only a 13-year-old can still carry. That sound cut through the heavy silence like a clean nail through fresh shingles. I closed my eyes for a second and let it wash over me. The papers were already signed, and for the first time since I hit that basement floor, I felt like the roof over our heads was finally safe. 2 weeks later, the big white moving truck backed slowly into my driveway, its engine rumbling low and heavy like distant thunder rolling across the Florida Keys. The morning sun was already fierce. The kind of sticky, breathless heat that makes your shirt cling to your skin before 9 o'clock. I sat on the front porch in my usual wooden rocking chair, left arm still cradled in its sling, ribs aching with every deeper breath. Gloria stood quietly beside me, refilling my coffee without a word, her presence steady and comforting like the old Royal Poinciana tree blooming red in the front yard. The truck's rear doors swung open with a loud metallic clang that echoed across the canal. Diego and Rachel moved like people wading through deep water, slow, deliberate, almost mechanical. 2 hired movers in gray uniforms carried box after box down the porch steps and loaded them into the dark interior of the truck without speaking. There was no shouting, no slammed doors, no final arguments, just the quiet, exhausted shuffle of 2 people who had finally run out of ways to fight reality. I watched every movement in silence. Diego lifted one end of the old leather couch we used to watch Sunday football on when he was still a boy. His face looked pale and drawn, eyes sunken, shoulders slumped under the weight of more than just furniture. He had aged 10 years in 2 weeks. Rachel directed the movers in a flat, toneless voice, pointing to which boxes went where. But the sweet, smiling mask she had worn for months was completely gone. She kept her gaze fixed on the ground, never once lifting her eyes toward the porch where I sat. Lucas stood a few feet away from me on the porch steps, hands deep in his pockets, watching his parents load their life into the truck. He hadn't said much since breakfast. Every few seconds he would glance at me, then back at the truck, like he was trying to decide which world he belonged to now. His small shoulders were tense, but he kept his chin up the way I had taught him. A large box labeled kitchen went past. Then Diego's set of golf clubs. Then the flat-screen TV they had bought last Christmas with money I never asked about. Each item disappeared into the truck's shadowy belly, and with it went another piece of the life they had tried so hard to steal from me. The movers worked efficiently, taping boxes, wrapping furniture and blankets, sliding everything into place with the quiet professionalism of people who had seen this scene many times before. Rachel paused at the bottom of the porch steps, holding a small cardboard box of her personal things. For one brief second, our eyes met across the yard. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. Her shoulders sagged. She turned away without a word and handed the box to one of the movers. Diego carried the last suitcase down the steps, placed it carefully inside the truck, and slammed the rear doors shut with a final, heavy thud that seemed to echo across the still canal water. He walked up the porch steps one last time. His boots sounded heavier than they should have on the wooden planks. He stopped in front of me, hands hanging loose at his sides, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. For a long moment neither of us spoke. The only sounds were the distant cry of seagulls and the soft lap of water against the dock. "I guess this is it," he said finally. His voice was hoarse, almost gone. I nodded once. "I guess it is." He turned toward Lucas. The boy stood very still, eyes wide, trying so hard to be brave that it hurt to watch. Diego knelt down slowly, every joint in his body seeming to protest, and opened his arms. Lucas stepped forward and let his father hug him. It wasn't a long hug. It wasn't dramatic. Just a quiet, awkward embrace between a father and son who no longer knew exactly how to fit together anymore. "I'm sorry, kid," Diego whispered against Lucas's hair. "I really am." Lucas didn't answer. He simply nodded against his father's shoulder, then stepped back. Diego stood up, wiped his face roughly with the back of his hand, and looked at me one final time. "Take care of him, Dad," he said. The words came out cracked and broken. "I always have," I answered. Diego turned and walked down the steps. Rachel was already waiting in their car at the curb, engine running. She didn't wave. She didn't look back. Diego climbed into the passenger seat, closed the door softly, and the car pulled away slowly, following the big moving truck down the street until both vehicles disappeared around the bend by the mangrove trees. The driveway fell quiet again. Only the gentle sound of the canal and the occasional cry of a gull overhead remained. Lucas stood there a moment longer, staring at the empty space where his parents' car had been. Then he turned and walked over to me. Without saying a word, he climbed into the rocking chair beside mine and leaned his head carefully against my good shoulder. I wrapped my right arm around him and held him tight, feeling the warmth of his small body and the faint tremble he was trying to hide. We sat like that for a long time. The sun climbed higher in the sky. Gloria quietly went inside to give us space. The moving truck and the car were long gone. But the weight of everything that had happened still lingered in the warm morning air like the last traces of a passing storm. Lucas finally spoke, his voice small but steady. "Grandpa, are they coming back?" I looked out at the canal, at the roof of my house that I had nailed down with my own hands more than 40 years ago. The shingles still held strong against every hurricane that had come through. "I don't know, kid," I said softly, "but whatever happens, this roof is yours now. And so am I." He nodded against my shoulder. I felt his body relax a little, the tension bleeding out of him like rainwater running off fresh shingles after a storm. The moving truck was gone. The house was quiet again, but for the first time in months, it finally felt like home. The moving truck and the car had long disappeared around the bend by the mangrove trees, leaving the driveway strangely empty and quiet. The big white truck with its rattling chains and the familiar sedan that had once brought Diego and Rachel to my door now felt like ghosts of a chapter I was finally closing. The morning sun beat down hard, the kind of sticky Florida heat that wraps around you like a damp towel, making the air heavy with the scent of salt, mangrove mud, and the faint sweetness of blooming Royal Poinciana in the front yard. I sat on the front porch in my usual rocking chair, left arm still cradled in its sling, ribs aching with every deeper breath. Gloria stood quietly beside me, refilling my coffee without a word. Her presence steady and comforting, like the old house itself that had stood through more hurricanes than I could count. Lucas stood a few feet away on the porch steps for a long moment, staring at the empty space where his parents' car had been parked. His small shoulders were tense, hands deep in his pockets, but he kept his chin up the way I had taught him. He hadn't said much since breakfast. Every few seconds his eyes would flick toward me, then back to the driveway, like he was trying to decide which world he belonged to now. The silence stretched, broken only by the gentle lap of canal water against the dock and the distant cry of seagulls wheeling overhead. Finally, he turned and walked over to me. Without a word, he climbed into the rocking chair beside mine and leaned his head carefully against my good shoulder. I wrapped my right arm around him and held him close, feeling the faint tremble he was trying so hard to hide. His hair smelled like the same sunscreen Rachel used to slather on him every morning, and for a second the familiar scent made my chest tighten. But I didn't let go. I just held him tighter, the way a grandfather should. We sat like that for a long time. The sun climbed higher, turning the canal into a sheet of liquid gold that shimmered and danced. Gloria quietly slipped inside to give us space, the screen door creaking softly behind her. The house behind us felt lighter somehow, as if the walls themselves had been holding their breath for months and could finally exhale. The weight of betrayal, the cold basement floor, the hospital beeps, the documents on the coffee table, all of it still lingered in the warm morning air like the last traces of a passing storm, but the storm had passed. After a while, Lucas spoke, his voice small but steady. "Grandpa, I want to stay here with you. I don't want to go with them. This is home." I felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight since the night I lay bleeding in the dark. "You sure about that, kid? It's a big choice. Your mom and dad?" "I'm sure." He cut in quietly, lifting his head to look at me. His eyes, his grandmother's eyes, were clear and certain. "They made their choice. I'm making mine. You never left me in the dark. You never pushed me away. I want to stay where it's safe." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat making it difficult to speak. "Then this is home, for as long as you want it. No more questions. No more goodbyes today." Later that evening, when the sky had turned that deep, fiery Florida orange I had loved for 43 years, Lucas did what he always did. He dragged the big extension ladder out of the garage without being asked. The aluminum clattered against the siding, a sound that had become the heartbeat of my evenings. I followed him slowly, testing each rung out of pure habit, even though my left arm was still in its sling, and my ribs flared with every movement. The pain was there, sharp and insistent, but I didn't stop. Some things, some views, are worth climbing for no matter how much it hurts. We reached the peak of the roof and sat side by side, legs dangling over the gutter just like we used to before everything fell apart. The shingles were still warm from the day's sun, radiating heat through our jeans. The breeze carried the rich smell of salt and mangrove, and down below the canal reflected the dying light like a mirror on fire. From up here, the whole world looked smaller, more manageable. The house, the dock, the mangrove line in the distance, all of it felt like it belonged to us again. Lucas swung his legs slowly. the way he always did when he was thinking hard. "Grandpa, can I ask you something?" "Anything, kid." Always. He looked out at the horizon where the last sliver of sun was slipping into the water, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and deep purple. Why did they do it? Why did Dad push you? Why did Mom laugh? I keep thinking about it, and I don't understand. I took a long, slow breath, letting the warm air fill my lungs. The pain in my ribs reminded me I was still here, still breathing. Because they were scared, Lucas. Scared of getting old. Scared of not having enough. Scared that the life they wanted was slipping away like sand through their fingers. Fear does strange things to people. It makes them forget who they are. It makes them forget the roof that kept them dry when they were little. It makes them push the very person who built that roof. He was quiet for a long minute, thinking. The breeze ruffled his hair. "But you weren't scared?" "Oh, I was terrified," I said with a small, honest laugh that hurt my ribs but felt good anyway. Lying there on that cold concrete floor in the dark, blood in my mouth, listening to them walk away. I was scared. But fear is just the price you pay for the view. You learn to climb anyway. You learn to build something that lasts even when the wind tries to tear it down. That's what I did for 43 years. That's what I'm still doing. Lucas nodded slowly, like he was storing every word somewhere deep inside where it could grow roots. I want to be like that. I want to build things that last. I want to sit on roofs and watch the sun go down and know I made something people can count on. I put my good arm around his narrow shoulders and pulled him closer. "You already are, kid. Every time you climb this ladder with me, every time you sit here and listen to an old man's stories, you're building something real. You're building trust. You're building family, the real kind, not the kind that pushes you downstairs when they think no one's watching. And that kind of family, that's the strongest roof there is." The sky deepened to purple. Stars began to poke through like tiny nails, holding the night in place. I told him more stories that night about the first roof I ever nailed down alone in the pouring rain, about the hurricane that tried to peel us off a church in Key Largo while we fought to keep the shingles on, about the day I held his grandmother Maria's hand on this very roof, and promised her I would always take care of our family, no matter what came. Lucas listened like every word was gold, the same way he always had, his head resting against my shoulder as the breeze cooled around us. When the first mosquitoes started to bite, we climbed down carefully, one rung at a time. But before we reached the ground, Lucas stopped on the ladder, one hand on the rung above him, and looked back up at me with those clear, grandmother's eyes. "Grandpa," he said, voice quiet but sure, "I'll never push you down the stairs. Not ever, no matter what happens. I promise." The words hit me harder than any fall I had taken. I felt my eyes sting in the gathering dark, and for a moment I couldn't speak. I just looked at this boy, this good, undeserving, completely innocent boy who had somehow managed to stay untouched by the poison that had filled his parents' hearts. "I know you won't, Lucas." I finally managed, my voice thick. "And that's why the roof over our heads is yours now. Really yours. Not because of papers or lawyers or money. Because you chose it. Because you chose me." We reached the ground. I folded the ladder and put it away while Lucas waited. Then we walked back to the porch together, shoulders touching, the way real family should. The night air smelled sweet with jasmine from the bushes Maria had planted years ago. The house lights glowed warm through the windows, and for the first time in months, the place felt full instead of hollow. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the house settle around me, the creak of the old floorboards, the distant lap of the canal, Lucas's soft breathing from the room down the hall, I realized something important. The company, the trucks, the money, the trust papers. Those were just things. The real roof over our heads wasn't shingles or wood or even the legal documents Tommy had filed. It was this: a 13-year-old boy who chose to stay, a grandfather who refused to stay down, a bond that no amount of greed or fear could break. The moving truck had taken away the people who tried to bury me, but it had left behind the one person who never would. And that, more than anything, was the roof that would last. The days after the moving truck left settled into a new kind of quiet. Not the heavy, suffocating silence that had filled the house when Diego and Rachel were still there, but a peaceful, breathing kind of quiet. The kind where you could hear the canal water lapping against the dock and the occasional call of a heron flying low over the mangroves. Lucas and I fell into a gentle rhythm that felt more like family than anything I had known in years. Mornings were slow coffee on the porch, evenings were the roof at sunset, and the in-between hours were filled with the small, ordinary things that make a house feel like home again. One evening, about 10 days after they left, Gloria and Tommy came by unannounced. Gloria brought her famous key lime pie and a crossword puzzle book. Tommy carried a bottle of good bourbon and that calm, steady presence he had carried since the army. We sat on the back porch as the sky turned orange and pink. The three of us, plus Lucas, who was sprawled on the wooden steps with a glass of lemonade, listening more than talking. Gloria took a sip of her sweet tea and looked out at the canal. You know, Vic, I've lived 3 houses down from you for 22 years. Watched you build that company from one rusty truck. Watched you bury Maria. Watched Diego grow up and then watched what happened. She shook her head slowly. Never thought I'd see the day a son would do that to his own father. Tommy swirled the bourbon in his glass, the ice clinking softly. The law is clear now. The trust is locked tighter than a hurricane shutter. No one can touch it. Lucas is protected for life. But I've been doing this job long enough to know the law only handles the money and the property. The rest is up to you. I nodded, rocking slowly in my chair. The sling on my left arm was finally starting to feel less like a prison and more like a reminder. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, I said. What family really means. I used to think it was blood. Same last name. Same roof. Same dinner table. Turns out blood can be the sharpest knife there is. Lucas looked up from the steps, his eyes serious in the fading light. But you're my blood, Grandpa. And you never hurt me. I smiled at him. The first real, full smile I had managed since the basement. That's right, kid. And you never hurt me either. That's the kind of blood that matters. Gloria reached over and patted my good arm. You did the hard thing, Vic. Most men in your position would have let them stay, would have kept handing over pieces of themselves until there was nothing left. You drew the line. You protected what mattered. That takes courage. Most people never find. Tommy raised his glass slightly. And you did it with your eyes open. You prepared. You planned. You made one call when most men would have just screamed for help. That 12-second call changed everything. Not just for you, for Lucas. For the whole damn company. Those crews out there still have jobs because of what you did in the dark. I looked out at the water, watching the last light of day bleed across it. The reflections on the porch felt different now. The rocking chair creaked under me, a familiar, comforting sound. The jasmine Maria had planted years ago still bloomed along the railing, filling the evening air with its sweet scent. For the first time since I woke up in that hospital bed, I felt something close to peace settling into my bones. I spent 43 years building something I thought would last forever. I said quietly. Trucks, contracts, roofs that could stand up to any storm. Turns out the thing that almost got taken from me wasn't the company. It was the boy sitting right here on these steps. The one who still wants to climb ladders with an old man and listen to stories about how it all started. Lucas grinned. A small, shy grin that lit up his whole face. I'm going to keep climbing with you, Grandpa. Every night. Even when your arm gets better and you don't need me to carry the ladder anymore. I laughed softly. The sound surprising even me. It didn't hurt my ribs as much as I expected. Deal. And when you're old enough, we'll put your name on the trucks right next to mine. Morales and Morales Roofing. How's that sound? Sounds perfect, he said. Gloria wiped the corner of her eye with the back of her hand and pretended it was just the breeze. Tommy raised his glass again. This time, in a silent toast. The four of us sat there as the sky turned deep purple and the first stars appeared, the porch light casting a warm glow over all of us. I looked out at the canal, at the roofline of my house silhouetted against the night, and for the first time since I hit that cold basement floor, I smiled a real smile. Not the polite one I used to wear for company. Not the tired one I wore when I was pretending everything was fine. A real one. The kind that comes when you realize the roof over your head was never about shingles or money or even blood. It was about who stayed when the lights went out. And in the end, the right people stayed. The sun was beginning its slow, fiery descent over the Florida Keys, painting the sky in layers of deep orange, burning pink, and rich purple that only a Gulf Coast evening can create. It was one of those perfect late spring sunsets, the kind that makes you stop whatever you're doing and just look. Lucas and I climbed the ladder together that evening, the aluminum rungs cool under our hands now that the day's heat had started to fade. My left arm was finally out of the sling, though it still ached when I reached too high. The ribs were better too, but every deep breath still reminded me of the night I lay on the basement floor, wondering if I would ever see another sunset like this. We reached the peak of the roof and sat side by side in our usual spot, legs dangling over the gutter, the shingles warm beneath us from a full day under the Florida sun. The canal stretched out below us like a ribbon of liquid gold, reflecting the sky so perfectly it looked like the water was on fire. The mangrove trees along the far bank stood dark against the glowing horizon, and the distant call of a heron echoed across the water. It was quiet up here. Peaceful. The kind of quiet that lets you think about the things that really matter. Lucas swung his legs slowly, the way he always did when something big was on his mind. He was 14 now, taller, broader in the shoulders, with the same stubborn chin I had at his age. The last few months had changed him, but not in the way I feared. Instead of becoming bitter or angry, he had grown quieter, more thoughtful, like the experience had carved something deeper into him. "Grandpa," he said after a long silence, his voice low but steady. "I've been thinking a lot about the company." I glanced at him, waiting. The breeze tugged gently at our shirts, carrying the familiar smell of salt, mangrove, and hot tar that had been part of my life for over 40 years. "I want to keep it," he continued. "Not just own it on paper, I want to work it. Learn how to roof the way you did. Climb the ladders, swing the hammer, smell the tar on a 100-degree day. I don't want to sell it to some big corporation in Miami. I want to build it bigger. Make it Morales and Morales for real. Like you promised that night we sat up here after they left." The words settled over me like a warm blanket. I felt a swell of pride, so strong it almost hurt more than my cracked ribs ever had. I looked out at the horizon, where the last sliver of sun was slipping into the water, turning the canal into molten gold. "You sure about that, kid?" I asked quietly. "It's hard work. Long hours. Hot sun. Rain. Hurricanes. People who will try to take advantage of you. People who might even try to push you down when they think you're not looking." Lucas nodded without hesitation. "I know. I saw what happened. I heard the stories. But I also saw what you did. You didn't stay down. You made one call in the dark and took everything back. You protected me when no one else would. That's the kind of man I want to be. The kind who builds something that lasts. The kind who fights for his family, instead of selling it." I felt my eyes sting. The sunset blurred for a moment, the colors bleeding together. I put my arm around his shoulders and pulled him close, the way I had done so many evenings since the moving truck left. "You know what I realized up here on this roof?" I said, my voice thick. "All those years I thought the legacy was the company. The trucks, the contracts, the name on the side of the building. Turns out the real legacy was never the business. It was you, the boy who chose to stay when everyone else walked away, the boy who still wants to climb ladders with an old man and learn how to nail down a roof that will keep people dry for the next 40 years. Lucas leaned into me, his head resting against my shoulder. "I'm not going anywhere, Grandpa. This roof, this house, this company, it's ours. Together." I want to learn everything. How to bid a job right. How to take care of the crews. How to make sure the work is done honest. And when I'm old enough, I want my name right next to yours on every truck. Morales and Morales Roofing. Just like you said, the sun finally slipped below the horizon, leaving the sky in a deep, glowing purple streaked with gold. The first stars began to appear. Tiny pinpricks of light that seemed to nail the night sky in place, the same way I had nailed down countless shingles over the decades. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the fall, the 12-second phone call that changed everything, the hospital room, the documents on the coffee table, the moving truck pulling away for the last time. All of it had led to this moment. A 14-year-old boy sitting on a roof with his grandfather, talking about the future, like it was something they would build together, instead of something to be taken. You know what the real roof over our heads is, Lucas? I asked softly. He looked at me, waiting. It's not the shingles. It's not the wood, or the nails, or even the company. It's this right here. A grandfather and a grandson who choose each other every single day. That's the only roof that no storm can ever tear down. Lucas smiled that bright, unguarded smile that reminded me so much of his grandmother. Then I guess we've got the strongest roof in the Keys. We sat there until the sky turned fully dark and the stars were thick overhead. The canal reflected the porch light from the house below, glowing warm and steady. The breeze cooled around us, carrying the sweet scent of jasmine from the bushes Maria had planted so many years ago. In that moment, I realized with perfect clarity that the D-San I had fought so hard to protect wasn't the trucks, the contracts, or even the name on the building. The real legacy was the boy sitting beside me. The real legacy was the roof we would keep building together. One shingle, one sunset, one honest day at a time. And that legacy was already safe. The sun had fully set, leaving the sky a deep, velvety purple scattered with stars that looked like tiny silver nails holding the night in place. Lucas and I remained on the roof a little longer than usual that evening, neither of us in any hurry to climb down. The canal below us had turned into a mirror of the heavens, reflecting the stars so clearly it felt like we were floating between two worlds. The warm breeze carried the familiar scent of salt, mangrove, and the faint sweetness of jasmine from the bushes my late wife Maria had planted so many years ago. It was one of those rare, perfect Florida nights when the world feels both vast and intimately small at the same time. I looked at my grandson sitting beside me, 14 years old now. Taller, stronger, with the same determined set to his jaw that I had when I was his age. The last few months had changed both of us, but in the best possible way. The betrayal that had once threatened to tear our family apart had instead forged something stronger, something unbreakable. Lucas rested his head against my shoulder, his breathing slow and content, and I wrapped my good arm around him, feeling the warmth of a boy who had chosen to stay when so many others had walked away. "Grandpa," he said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. "Do you ever regret how things turned out? With Dad and Mom, I mean." I took a long, slow breath, letting the night air fill my lungs. The ribs no longer hurt the way they once did, and the shoulder had healed enough that I could climb ladders again without wincing. But some scars run deeper than bone. I thought about the question for a moment, staring out at the dark water, where the reflection of the porch light glowed like a beacon. "No, Lucas," I answered truthfully. "I don't regret it. Not anymore. I regret the pain it caused you. I regret that you had to watch your parents make choices no child should ever see. But I don't regret protecting what mattered most. Because if I hadn't made that one call in the dark, if I hadn't fought for this roof over our heads, we wouldn't be sitting here tonight. We wouldn't be talking about the future like it belongs to us. And that future, that's worth every bruise, every broken rib, every hard truth we had to face." Lucas was quiet for a while, swinging his legs gently. "I used to think family was supposed to be perfect," he said, "like in the movies. But it's not, is it? Family is messy. It can hurt, but it can also heal." I smiled in the darkness, You're wiser than I was at your age, kid. Family isn't about blood alone. It's about who stays when the lights go out. Who chooses to climb the ladder with you, even when it's hard. Who refuses to let greed or fear push them or you down the stairs. That's the real roof. The one no storm can ever tear down. We sat there as the stars grew brighter, and the night air cooled around us. I thought back over everything that had happened, the mild stroke that started it all, the invitation that seemed like a blessing, the slow cracks that turned into a chasm, the basement floor where I lay bleeding and alone, the 12-second phone call that changed the course of 3 generations. I thought about the fear, the betrayal, the anger, and the unexpected grace that followed. Chúa đã cho tôi cơ hội thứ hai khi tôi nằm đó trong bóng tối. Nghĩ rằng mọi thứ đã kết thúc, nhờ Chúa mà tôi còn sống để thấy ngày này. Để ngồi trên mái nhà này với cháu trai mình và biết rằng di sản thực sự không phải là xe tải hay hợp đồng, mà là tình yêu không điều kiện. Chúa chứng kiến tất cả mọi giọt máu, mọi lời nói dối, mọi lựa chọn, và Ngài đã dẫn tôi qua bóng tối để đến với ánh sáng này. The lesson I learned, the one I want Lucas to carry with him for the rest of his life, is simple but hard won. Never let anyone convince you that family is defined by last names or shared blood alone. Family is defined by the choices we make when no one is watching. It's defined by the hands that push you down and the hands that reach out to pull you back up. It's defined by the courage to protect what matters most, even when it costs you everything you thought you had. I looked at Lucas again. His eyes were shining in the starlight, full of quiet strength. You know what, Grandpa? He said. I think we've got the strongest roof in the whole Keys. I laughed softly, the sound carrying across the canal. We sure do, kid. And we're going to keep building it together. One shingle at a time. One honest day at a time. One sunset at a time. We climbed down the ladder slowly, carefully, side by side. When our feet touched the ground, Lucas helped me fold it and put it away without being asked. Then we walked back to the porch together, shoulders touching, the way real family walks through life. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, through the betrayal, the fall, the darkness, and the hard-won light, then I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Stories like this aren't just entertainment. They're reminders that even when your own blood tries to bury you, you can still rise. You can still protect what matters. You can still build a roof that lasts. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you to look at the people around you a little closer, to protect your legacy, or to make that one call when everything seems lost, then do me one favor. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment below. Who is the person in your life you would call in your own 12 seconds of light? Let's talk about it. Let's remind each other that we're not alone. My name is Victor Morales. I'm 69 years old. I fell down a flight of stairs, and I got back up. And with the grace of God and the love of a good grandson, I'm still standing on the roof I built, looking out at a future that finally feels like mine. Thank you for being part of this journey. I'll see you on the next roof.